It is rare that the most important sound in Washington is silence. But if you listen closely to the corridors of the Capitol right now, beneath the noise of cable news outrages and social media storms, you will hear it. It is the silence of hesitation, the silence of a loyalty that has finally hit a wall. For years, the political physics of the United States has been predictable: action and reaction. The president moves, the opposition party screams, the president's party defends. It is a muscle memory that has defined a decade of governance. But something extraordinary is happening. The physics have broken. Right now, in closed-door cloakrooms and encrypted group chats, the Republican Party, the very machinery that facilitated the rise of Donald Trump, is beginning to jam the gears. This is not a story about Democrats. This is not a story about the media. This is a story about a call coming from inside the House. For the first time, we are seeing a coordinated, quiet, yet lethal pushback from GOP lawmakers moving to block the specific powers the president is trying to hold on to at any cost. We are watching a collision between a presidency built on the concept of total authority and a legislature remembering, perhaps just in time, that it is a co-equal branch of government. Over the next half hour, we are going to deconstruct this revolt. We are going to look at the three specific fronts where this war is being fought: the war over military authority, the weaponization of emergency declarations, and the silent, suffocating death of oversight. This isn't just breaking news. It is a stress test for the American experiment. The question is no longer who wins the next election. The question is whether the rules of the game will survive long enough to have one. To understand the revolt, you have to understand the trigger. It wasn't a mean tweet. It wasn't a scandal about money. It was the realization that the president's rhetoric regarding war had moved from metaphorical to kinetic. For a long time, the Republican foreign policy establishment comforted itself with a myth that the president's isolationism was a negotiating tactic, that his threats to abandon alliances were just leverage, the art of the deal applied to geopolitics. But then came the specifics. Then came the scenarios regarding NATO. Then came the discussions about using military assets to seize sovereign territory from allies, framed not as conquest, but as acquisition. When Senator Chris Murphy stood up and laid out the implications of a conflict with European allies, it landed like a shockwave. Why? Because he wasn't talking about a hypothetical future. He was describing the legal machinery that was already humming to life. Here is the reality that keeps senators awake at night. The American military is designed to obey. It is not designed to debate. Once a president frames a military action as a valid option, the Pentagon produces plans, logistics chains are activated, the ship begins to turn. And this is where the War Powers Act, a piece of legislation often treated as a relic of the Vietnam era, suddenly dusted itself off and walked onto the Senate floor. We saw Republicans, staunch conservatives who have spent careers voting for expanded military budgets, suddenly join Democrats to pull the emergency brake. They advanced a resolution limiting the president's ability to act unilaterally. This was the first fracture. Reportedly, the president's reaction to this was not to invite these senators to the White House for a debate. It was apoplectic rage. The phone calls described by aides were not conversations, they were threats. The reported exchange with Senator Susan Collins wasn't just about a vote count, it was a collision of worldviews. For Trump, the vote was a personal betrayal. For the senators, it was an institutional necessity. They realized that if they did not tie the president's hands now, they might be complicit in a conflict that no one voted for and no one could stop. This is the Greenland scenario writ large. It sounds absurd on its face, the idea of risking a shooting war with a NATO ally over territorial rights. But in a system where the executive has unchecked authority, the absurd becomes possible, and then it becomes probable. The GOP revolt on war powers is an admission that the guardrails of norms are gone. The only thing left is the hard, cold steel of statute. and they are rushing to bolt it down before the engine revs up again. If war powers was the first front, the second is arguably more dangerous because it is more subtle. It is the weaponization of the word emergency. In the American political lexicon, an emergency used to mean a hurricane, a terror attack, a pandemic, events that required speed that Congress couldn't provide. But in this administration, emergency has been redefined. It now means I cannot get what I want through the legislative process. Let's look at the declaration regarding Venezuelan oil assets. On paper, it looks like foreign policy, a move to secure resources to pressure a regime. But look closer. This declaration allows the executive branch to bypass competitive bidding, bypass environmental review, and arguably bypass congressional appropriation oversight. It allows the president to seize the power of the purse, the one power the Constitution explicitly gave to Congress, and tuck it into his pocket. This is where the Trump worldview becomes critical to understand. He views the United States not as a republic of laws, but as a corporation with a single CEO. In a corporation, if the CEO wants to acquire an asset, he doesn't ask the shareholders for permission on every line item. He declares it strategic and he moves. But the United States is not a holding company. Republicans are looking at this precedent with horror, not just because of what Trump is doing today, but because of what a future president might do tomorrow. If a president can declare a national emergency to seize oil assets or build a wall, what stops a future Democratic president from declaring a climate emergency to seize coal plants? What stops a declaration of a gun violence emergency to bypass the Second Amendment? This is the calculation happening in the quiet corners of the Senate cloakroom. The emergency power is a loaded gun left on the table. Trump has picked it up and is waving it around. Republicans are trying to figure out how to unload it without getting shot in the process. It is a panicked realization that they have empowered an executive branch that has grown too strong for its own good. They are watching a president who uses emergency declarations not as a shield for the nation, but as a sword against the legislature. And every time he does it, he normalizes the idea that Congress is optional, that the people's representatives are merely an advisory board that can be overruled by a signature. While the war rhetoric and emergency declarations grab the headlines, there is a third front in this revolt. It is quiet. It is boring. It involves PDF files and redaction markers, and it is where democracy actually goes to die. It is the war on oversight. For months, we have seen a pattern. Congress asks for documents. The administration says soon. The deadline passes. Congress asks again. The administration says executive privilege. The deadline passes. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and others have been sounding the alarm on this. They aren't talking about secret tapes or smoking guns. They are talking about the basic plumbing of government compliance. Inspectors general, the internal watchdogs designed to keep agencies honest, are being ghosted. Reports are being buried. Why does this matter? Why should the average American care about a stalled report from the General Services Administration? Because transparency is the only mechanism that converts suspicion into accountability. Without documents, without timelines, without the paper trail, politics becomes purely a game of he said, she said. And in a game of he said, she said, the loudest voice wins. The administration knows this. They understand that if they can delay the release of information long enough, the public will get bored. They rely on scandal fatigue. They rely on the complexity of the bureaucracy to hide the reality of their actions. But here is where the miscalculation lies. Republicans in Congress, even those loyal to the president's agenda, need oversight to function. They need to know where the money is going. They need to know if the military is solvent. They need to know if the intelligence is accurate. When an administration blinds the oversight committees, it blinds its own allies. We are seeing GOP committee chairs, people who have defended the president on television for years, start to issue subpoenas. We are seeing them demand unredacted files. This isn't performative. This is panic. They are realizing that they are flying a plane and the pilot has covered up the instrument panel. This is the stall, the strategic delay, but the stall is failing because when you refuse to show your work, people assume the worst. The lack of transparency has transformed from an annoyance into an indictment. It suggests that the administration is hiding something structural, a failure of process so deep that they cannot afford to let the light in. So why now? Why, after years of falling in line, are Republicans finally pushing back? It is tempting to ascribe this to morality, to say that they have finally found their conscience. But in Washington, conscience is rarely a primary motivator. Survival is. The Republican Party is currently engaging in a high-stakes triage. They are looking at the polling, they are looking at the map, but more importantly, they are looking at history. They know that Donald Trump is a singular phenomenon. He has a unique hold on the base, but they also know that he is term-limited or politically finite. The Republican Party has to exist after he is gone. If they allow the presidency to mutate into a monarchy, if they allow the destruction of the War Powers Act, the normalization of permanent emergencies, and the erasure of oversight, they will inherit a broken system. They will be the party that burned down the House to keep one man warm. The quiet revolt is an attempt to hedge their bets. By voting for the War Powers Resolution, they are putting a marker down. They are saying, we supported the man, but we defended the Constitution. It is an insurance policy. But it is also a recognition of danger. Trump's behavior has shifted. He is no longer just attacking Democrats. He is attacking the concept of limitation itself. And for a conservative ideology built on the idea of limited government, this is a bridge too far. Watch the seniority. It isn't just the retiring moderates speaking up. It is the committee chairs. It is the people with the most to lose. They are calculating that the risk of angering Trump is now less than the risk of letting him run unchecked. This is the tipping point. When the cost of loyalty exceeds the cost of rebellion, the rebellion begins. We are in a moment of profound consequence. It is easy to get lost in the noise of the day, the latest outrage, the latest press conference. But step back. Look at the architecture. What is happening in Washington right now is a stress test of the American idea. Can a system of checks and balances withstand a leader who recognizes neither? The answer, surprisingly, is coming from the people we least expected. The friction is not coming from the opposition. It is coming from the foundation. The Republicans pushing back against Donald Trump are not doing it to be heroes. They are doing it because they have looked into the abyss of unchecked executive power and they have decided to step back. They have realized that a president who acknowledges no rules is not a leader. He is a liability. This revolt may be quiet. It may be messy. It may be happening in the margins of legislative text and in private phone calls, but it is real. The emergency declarations, the war rhetoric, the stalled documents, these are not separate stories. They are the same story. They are the sound of a presidency trying to outrun accountability. And the response, the slow, grinding, reluctant pushback from the Senate, is the sound of the system trying to save itself. History will not remember the tweets. It will not remember the rallies. It will remember who stood up when the definition of the presidency was being rewritten. Something extraordinary is happening in Washington. The silence is ending, and for the first time in a long time, the Constitution is beginning to speak.